Hi everyone, I'm Dina with Mills Family Gardening. Today is January 1st. We're in North Texas, Zone 8A. Today is a beautiful, almost 80-degree weather, and we're going to start some tomato seeds. So I'm going to make holes that are about 1/4 inch deep because tomato seeds are not large. I'm going to take my tomato seeds and I'll use about 3 or 4 seeds per hole just to make sure that at least one of the seeds sprouts. And I'm going to put them in the hole. And I also make sure that I made the soil moist before I plant the seeds so that the seeds wouldn't get washed away. And I just used regular potting mix soil. I didn't use a special seed starting soil, and that's fine. So now I'm going to cover the seeds lightly and push them down lightly so they would be in contact with the soil so that they would stay moist from the soil. Then I'm going to water them and put them under the grow light in the house. I'm going to set the seeds on the heating mat so they would germinate faster. They can germinate without a heating mat, but it will take them longer to germinate. But eventually they will sprout. And I'm going to set the grow light for 17 hours on and 7 hours off. That way they will get some rest during the night for 7 hours. And I'm going to make sure the soil stays moist at all times so the seeds would not dry up. From the beginning, the seedling tray has been sitting on top of a heating mat, and also I never covered the seeds with any lid or dome. It's been 28 days since we started our tomato seeds, and they have grown quite a bit, and you can see that they've gotten much taller. All this time I've been watering them with rainwater, and then I switched the grow lights to where they're on for 16 hours and off for 8 hours. So today we have to transplant our tomatoes because they're too big for these little cells. And I'm going to be using the best organic potting soil that I could find so that they would hopefully recover and be growing well. I'm going to fill up this little pot just a little bit with some potting soil on the bottom. And then I'm going to use a knife to help pull one of the seedlings out of the cell. And I'm going to separate the soil from the walls of the cell gently, not to damage the roots. And then I'm gonna go all the way to the bottom of the cell with a knife and try to pull it up from the bottom and pull on the seedlings at the same time to get the whole root ball out of the cell tray. So I'm gonna put it all the way on the bottom of this little pot and simply cover it with the dirt. Just put the dirt all around it to make sure that the dirt comes in contact with the plants and roots. And then I'm gonna tap gently on the soil, not too hard. I made sure that the soil was moist. That way it was easier to take them out of the cell tray and put them in a larger container. And we also put our seedlings under the old grow light. Hopefully they'll like it better than the new grow light. It's been a week since we moved our tomato seedlings into larger containers, and they have grown nicely. They have gotten much greener under the new grow light with the new organic potting soil. And today is the day when we need to thin them out because they're too crowded in each container. And for that, I'm going to pick the strongest seedlings. For example, this one looks stronger than the other one, so I'm just with scissors going to trim that one down. I'm not going to pull it out so that the root system wouldn't get damaged. And the stronger seedling is going to keep growing in this container. Other seedlings, you can put them in the water and they'll root along the stem as long as the stem is in the water. And then you can actually plant them in the ground and they will produce more tomatoes. You can also remove the lower leaves because they don't really do anything important here. Today is February 11th. Our tomato seedlings are looking good, and since I use good quality potting soil, I don't need to fertilize them. But if I didn't need to fertilize them, then I would use fish fertilizer. It's right there, and I use 2 teaspoons per gallon of water. I'm using rainwater here, so I already put 2 teaspoons in here. And I'm simply going to lift up one container. In fact, this little seedling looks a little droopy. It looks like it might use some watering. So I'm going to lift up the container and pour all that water straight into the seedling tray. That's the easiest way to water the seedlings. That way the water will be soaked up by the soil and the seedlings will be happy. Today is March 5th. It's been a little over 2 months since we started our tomatoes from seed. Today is the day I'm hardening off the tomato seedlings or plants at this point. All this time they were inside of the house under the grow light, but today I picked a nice mild day. And this whole week is supposed to be mild. The weather is going to stay above 40 even at night. So this is a perfect week to harden off our tomato seedlings. And I simply put them in this place that gets dappled sun all of the afternoon. It gets some morning sun. And right now the sun is not very hot, so this is a perfect spot for them. I'm not going to be moving them in and out of the house. I'm just gonna keep them here for the whole week and possibly until the day I transplant them into the ground, depending on the weather. Our tomato plants have gotten a little tall and leggy because I started them too early. That's what happens. But it's okay. When I plant them into the ground, I'm simply going to plant them deeper and they'll be just fine. I'm also going to grow some of my tomato plants in containers. For example, I have this Roma variety. They grow really well in containers. They're determinate. And for that, I'm going to reuse this container that I used last year for a pepper plant. I simply removed the old pepper plant. I dumped the soil into the box and I moved some of the soil back to the container. Then I sprinkled some of the fertilizer and I repeated the layers of the soil and fertilizer. The soil is pretty moist from all the rain that we've gotten, so I'm not going to water it. Now the container is about halfway full, so I'm going to take this plant and get it out of the pot. You see that the root system is pretty strong, and actually the little pot is starting to get too small for this plant. You can see that the roots are getting a little bound, but not too bad, so I'm going to loosen the roots a little bit. And then I'll remove the bottom leaves because they look yellowish. That's not good. And also it's always a good idea to plant the tomato plant deeper. So I'm going to set it in the center of the pot. Actually, I can plant it even deeper than that. So about this depth would be good. So I'm going to fill it with the old soil and then sprinkle with a little bit of fertilizer along the way. And then I'll mix the fertilizer with the soil and then add a little more soil. And if I feel that the soil is too dry, I can always water it to make it more moist. Then I'll sprinkle a little bit more fertilizer and mix it with the soil, and then I'll keep going until I fill the pot all the way to the top. I filled up the pot. I left a little bit space in case I need to add a little more soil later, and also I'm going to press it lightly, not too hard, so the roots would be in contact with the soil. And we're done with planting our Roma tomato in the container. Today is March 21st and it's an average last frost date, and it's a nice day, and for the next week we're supposed to have the temperatures above 40 degrees, so today is the perfect time to finally transplant our tomatoes outside. During their hardening off time, I had to take them into the garage for a couple of nights because the temperature dropped below 35 and I didn't want them to die, and they did just fine. In fact, one night the temperature went all the way down to the 30 degrees and they still survive and they look happy. There's still a possibility of light freeze or frost, but tomato plants are resilient and they can easily survive if the temperature stays above 34 or 35 degrees. When the temperature goes below 34 degrees, I usually try to cover them with a box or a used milk jug. I'm going to remove the lower leaves, especially that they got kind of yellow. So I'm going to get it out of its pot. There are two ways to plant tomato into the ground. The first way is to simply put them in the middle of the hole. I dug the hole pretty deep, and then simply to pile the dirt back on the tomato. Another way would be to lay down like this, either this way or that way. I think in this case I'll lay down like this and gently hold it up, because my tomato plant is so long and I want it to go into the ground as deep as possible, but I can't dig the hole deeper. So I'm simply going to lay down and then most of it will be in the ground. So I'm going to fill the hole back up with the dirt. I already added some llama manure. A few weeks ago, I added some kitchen scraps straight into the ground, and you can see that they still haven't broken down, but it's okay. And there's an earthworm enjoying all the kitchen scraps, but it's okay. I'm going to simply kind of crumble it and add it to the soil, and the tomato plant will be just fine. So I'll put the old dirt back into the hole like that. I'll also add some fertilizer to give extra boost and food to the tomato plant, and mix the fertilizer with the soil, and then put the rest of the soil around the tomato plant like that, and make sure the tomato plant is supported pretty well. There are a lot of earthworms because of all the llama manure and kitchen scraps that I put earlier. Then I'm going to put the drip line back where it was, and then I'll have to fasten it to the ground. And we're done planting our tomato plant in the ground, and that's how I'm going to plant the rest of them. I usually put the drip irrigation for about 30 minutes every other day, but if I feel, especially during the hot summer months, if I feel that the soil is too dry and it's not enough, then I can put it on more often. But if I feel that the soil stays moist longer, I'll simply water it less, for example, twice a week. And if I water it with a hose, again, I'll just come here and kind of feel the soil with my finger. If I feel that it's dry, then I'll water it with a hose. And after I plant all the tomatoes, I'll add mulch to protect the soil from drying up and the roots from getting too hot. Today is April 30th. Our tomato plants are doing great. You can see that we have some jute tied to the wire. My daughters helped me do that. And I also would like to point out that soon after I planted these tomato plants, especially with these lollipop tomatoes, we had some problem with yellow leaves. They looked very sickly. They had some brownish and yellowish on them. And first I thought it was a disease, but the thing was that all the rest of the plants looked very healthy, green and lush. What I think might have happened is that these warmth-loving tomatoes were planted out a little bit too early. We still had some cooler and chilly days, and they were a little bit stressed. And it's very possible that they also got some wind damage, because you can see that now it's warmed up. The leaves look much healthier and greener. I can see some yellowish there still. But we try to fertilize them on a weekly basis, and you can see that they even started producing little fruit. And our black strawberry tomatoes have also set fruit already. Today is May 13th, and our tomatoes have turned into a jungle. Last year I did a one branch method of growing tomatoes, but this year I decided to do multi-stem, and honestly I have not noticed the difference in their production. They're producing tomatoes really well. All I need to do is to keep tying these extra stems to the wire. Usually wind pollination is enough for them, but sometimes when I walk in the garden and walk by tomatoes, whenever I see open flowers, I simply shake that branch a little bit like that. And I do that with every flower, right there, and then right there. That way, multiple flowers get pollinated. And throughout their growing season, whenever I see some sickly or yellow leaves, I simply keep pruning them, and the tomato plants keep growing. Today is July 3rd. Summer heat has set in, and our tomato plants are struggling. The leaves are yellowing, they look stressed, so there's no point at keeping the tops on the tomatoes. So for the summer, I'm going to remove the top to the little shoot that comes out of the side of this branch. So I'm going to trim it right above the side shoot. And so now this side shoot will become a new plant, and in September it will produce new tomatoes. So I'm going to try to keep it alive till September, keep it healthy. Right now I can see that it has some spotty leaves, so I'll have to make sure to water it well so it wouldn't be too stressed. And then in September, hopefully, it will produce new tomatoes for us. I made sure to harvest tomatoes as soon as I noticed some red coloring on them. If I kept them on the vine longer, then I'm sure squirrels or some other critters would get those tomatoes. And I simply keep those tomatoes on the countertop. In a matter of a week, they ripen and turn red, and they're ready to eat. Tomatoes can be grown in a single branch or several branches. This year I decided to go with several branches. But even if you decide to go with several branches, make sure to remove lower and all the yellowing leaves to open up space for air and sunlight. But I think next year I will grow tomatoes with a single stem method, because having multiple stems on the vines is messy, and it prevents the air and sunlight from getting in, and then the leaves turn yellow and tomatoes are diseased. Throughout their growing season, we've been fertilizing our tomatoes through our drip irrigation. It helped them tremendously to grow and produce well. I really hope this video was helpful to you in how to grow tomatoes. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.